Hi everyone, thanks for joining us, and thanks for those who have arrived nice and early. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes to allow for late arrivals. Just for clarity, nobody is displaying video or audio today, and the participants can't see one another's names, so we're proper webinar style today. Hi Craig, thanks for joining us. Diane, hello. Gemma, Julia, Justin, Louise, Ryan, another Ryan, and Sarah. Oh, Craig, straight in. Does anybody else have to change their Zoom name from their quiz team? Quiz team name every time. It might just be you, that one, Craig, I think. What's your quiz name? Right, we've got people flying in now, but the numbers are still going up, so I'm just going to leave it a little bit longer before we make a start. Hi, John. If a couple more people could just post in the chat, just so that I know it's not just me and Craig, that'd be great. So just let us know you can hear us, and if you've got a quiz name, what it is. Thanks, guys. A couple more coming in, but I'm losing track. Andrew, I think you weren't here before, so hello. Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. So you'll see an option on Zoom to chat to all panelists. That's all the speakers for today. Or you can chat directly to any individual, including the panelist, or you can put a post for everybody to see. So we try to allow the speakers to get through their content without too much disruption. So if you think of any good questions, just post them as we go, and then me and Adam will collate them at the end and ask the speakers once they've finished their slot, just so that we don't disrupt them. But jot them down whilst they're in your head, and I'll work my way through them at the end. There's Q&A and there's chat. I'm not too fussed which one you go for, just whatever's easiest for you. Okay, I'll give it 30 more seconds. Still got people coming in. Hello, Pete. So I'll just refer to people by first name today, so maintain confidentiality for those that want to. We do have the WhatsApp group, so anyone that's not in the WhatsApp group, let me know, and I can add you in there afterwards if you want to continue networking, digital networking, the best we can get these days. Hello, Diane. Hello, Martin. Good to have you back. Brill. Right, guys, we are 4 minutes past 3 now, so I'm going to make a start. Let me just clear my screen up from all those bits. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul. I'm the Managing Director of MAP. We provide a full outsourced finance function specifically for the digital creative industry. We're based in Manchester. We look after about 130 clients across the UK, and maybe one in Australia soon, actually, after an exciting discovery call earlier this week. I'm joined by my colleagues of the Bulletproof Agency Network, Mike Henderson, who runs Riskbox. They are an insurance company who do a lot of work with the digital creatives. Steve Kunchevich from BLM Law, he's an IP lawyer, and Adam Carolan, who's a financial planner. So we used to run in-person events pre-COVID. Obviously, we can't do that now, but we started doing webinars instead at the start of lockdown, and they've gone down really well, which is great. We always like to ask our network, if you like, what things they would like to hear from us. And off the back of the last session, Jay asked if we would do a slot on employee ownership EMI scheme. So delighted to have secured Dev Oxley, the chairman of the Employee Ownership Association, who's here to speak to us today. with a business who's actually fully employee owned as of the last few years to tell their story. And then also equally pleased to have Matt Johnson from Form, who many of you will know, some of you might not do. Matt runs a consultancy called Form over in Liverpool, but don't hold that against him. Does a lot of work in Manchester as well. And delighted that Matt's here today to talk us through some pieces on culture in an interview with Adam. So introductions to follow in detail. We like to keep the slots nice and short and succinct, because I know you're busy people and you'll have lots of pinging going on your mobile phones and your laptops today. If you could try and minimize those as much as possible, we're only going to have you for an hour or so, but there's going to be some really valuable content for you today. We will share any slides, but I don't think there are any today actually, but anything relevant we'll share in a post mail out. Bulletproof guys, so Adam, Steve, Mike, if you want to start switching your videos on. I'm just going to give a quick update from each of the Bulletproof founders in our areas of expertise. So I might as well go first whilst I'm going. Some of you will have seen the extensions to the loan schemes that the government's introduced, to the bounce back loan schemes and CBILS loan schemes, but time is going very fast and they're quickly coming to an end. I also know that a lot of lenders are behind on processing applications. So if you've not already applied for at least a bounce back, but probably a CBILS, you probably should be doing that very soon. Interest-free, capital repayment free for 12 months. That it makes a lot of sense. There's not many reasons not to do it. You can repay early and it doesn't cost you a penny. So if that's something that we can help you with at MAP, then let us know about that. The insolvency leniencies, if you like, that were introduced earlier in COVID have come to an end. So we need to be very careful for any balance sheets that are in negative equity to make sure that you're not falling foul of any issues that are going to come and bite you from an insolvency position. So let us know on that. Interestingly, on more positive news, we've seen a lot of interest around M&A activity. So getting a lot of clients coming to us and talking to us about exit planning, about mergers and acquisition opportunities. And we're helping a couple of clients to either position their business for sale, discuss exit planning, whatever way that might be, and we're going to explore one of those in depth today. Or if they're acquisitive, look at other businesses that might be interested in buying as well, and how to go through that process. If that's of interest, then let us know. Okay, let's start with Mike.
Always me first. Shocking.
Because you're always best prepared, Mike.
Yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to be talking about today. No, I'm going to quickly crack on with something that we've had a few queries on recently, and it's also government related, and it's the Film and TV Production Restart Scheme. So I'm going to start with some, so for agencies who are involved in production, and this is something that's been raised, I'm going to start sort of by, unfortunately, sort of saying it's actually not going to be of much use to any of you. For various reasons. One of them is you have to have full production indemnity type cover in place first and foremost. But the most important thing is that a lot of types of productions are excluded. So if you are producing adverts or promotional content or even recording live events and so forth, they are actually excluded from the scheme. So to give us a quick overview of what the scheme's supposed to provide, it's supposed to provide that gap in cover where your reshoot costs and so forth would be covered should there be a COVID outbreak. Traditionally, that used to be insured within a producer's indemnity policy. Going forward, it's not. The government have put this together to plug that gap, but it is literally for film and TV. So as I say, to sort of unfortunately give the bad news nice and early, it doesn't actually respond for the things that agencies would really require. So on that happy note, whatever Adam and Steve want to say will be far, far more interesting and welcome. Okay.
Cheers, Mike. Steve?
Right, thanks, guys. Yeah, it's never an enviable position being the jam in a Mike and Adam sandwich, but I'll do my best. What Mike will have forgotten to tell you is if you look on his LinkedIn feed, for agencies, there's a really, really good guide about when you need to notify your insurers of an incident that's very, very much worth having a look at. Also, again, not jumping on Adam's spot, but we're also going to be running a private client seminar talking about financial planning, wills, estate, tax planning for business owners this Thursday. I can let you have some more details if you'd like them in the chat or otherwise. In terms of what else is happening, well, there's actually quite a lot happening in and around law. Anecdotally with clients, we're seeing a lot of people still, a lot of agencies trying to put the house in order, which is a good thing for obvious reasons. I think it's been given a bit more energy by the COVID-19 outbreak, but also we've seen some big new client wins for agencies. We've been working with one in particular with a really considerable international client. So it looks like big project work is starting to pick up again. Interestingly, although GDPR remains what it is, we've also started to see a bit of a wave of nuisance litigation now with people going looking for non-compliant websites that don't have the right kind of cookie banners and actually suing people for it. Now, we've been able to get one of those thrown out of court over the course of the last couple of months. But because of a couple of unhelpful cases, we're going to see that for some time to come. There's a couple of cases out of the European courts that talk about what kind of cookie banners you need to have on your site and how it works, the fact that you need a proper opt-in. So we're more than happy to have a chat with you about that, but certainly we're going to be doing a blog with Mike at Riskbox for that, and we'll update that in due course. But as Paul says, we're starting to see an uptick in M&A. All of a sudden, businesses that have money are getting pretty acquisitive, and we're seeing exits at the same time as well. So there's lots going on. We're hoping that whatever our dear Prime Minister announces at 5 p.m. this afternoon, we're going to see agencies continue to prosper and great work, and maybe are over the first shock of it and sort of know what's coming. But on that cheerful note, I'll pass over to my good friend Adam Carrollman.
Thanks, Steve. M&A is an interesting one, I think. So I did a webinar last week, and I'm doing a webinar on Thursday. I think the thing on my mind at the moment is capital gains tax, particularly entrepreneurs relief. So it kind of got hidden by COVID, but entrepreneurs relief got changed from 10 million to 1 million per person. So effectively 2 million per couple. So kind of got lost in the noise over the last 6 months. But I mean, Paul will have an opinion on this, but I'm fully expecting capital gains tax to be attacked in the next budget. So, you know, my advice is, if you're thinking about going through the exit process, which is quite a long process, you know, tax is not the driver, but is very relevant to do that. And there'll always be ways to plan around that. So Deb's going to talk about the tax advantages of going through employee ownership, which is great. But, you know, I expect in the next 6 months, CGT will be reformed in some way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Adam. Matt, if you want to switch your camera off, and Adam, if you go straight into introducing Matt and into your interview. So for everyone else, if you just post any questions for Matt, Adam's going to monitor that and pass them over to him. So over to you guys. I'm going to switch my camera off a little while.
Great, thanks, Paul. Look, we're really lucky today to have Matt Johnson. So a guy I've spent a bit of time with, not enough time with, but massively appreciate you being on, Matt. Do you want to give us a background? I think most people will know who you are in the sector.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for carving out a little bit of time. I hope you and your families are all okay. My name's Matt. I live over in Liverpool, which, as one of our clients in Denmark sent me a little note the other day, just saying, I hope you're okay in that fine city of yours. So Liverpool is fine. We work across the whole of both the UK, Europe and America. And we work with a whole heap of digital, creative and technology businesses, helping their leadership teams to not only think about the strategic plan that they have in place, but also importantly, the leadership capabilities of their senior team and the people that work within the business. I've worked in the digital, creative and tech sector for 25 plus years. A whole heap of experience, was one of the co-founders and chief exec of Mando, independently owned business over in Liverpool. Sold my interest in that business in 2013. Married to Ellie, who's a writer, theatre director, got 3 grown kids. And yeah, I'd love being involved in what is just a brilliant sector and space. So that's a little bit about me.
Right, let's get stuck in. If you want to ask questions, I'm happy for you to ask questions. I think Matt is as well. But yep. I think what's most on my mind is what you've been up to for the last 6 months, Matt, because I think that's going to give us a pretty good indicator of where the sector is.
Yeah, so I think just to frame this conversation that we're going to have today, and we really would encourage you just to throw things into chat. Let's just maximize this sort of 20-minute slot we've got together. But we exist to accelerate both the potential and the value of businesses in this sector. And we're seeing kind of three key themes emerge. And one is around reconnecting with the culture and purpose of your organization. Secondly is making sure that the craft, e.g. the product that you're producing, is at the highest possible sort of quality point. And then thirdly is making sure that the commercials of your business are still sort of match ready, match fit for this time. So first off, I guess culture. Everyone knows that phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know, it's an old adage, it's an old conversation that goes time and time again. But one of the things that we see more and more of is that the clarity and the vision that leaders have in their businesses to be able to make sure that culture is connected is so, so important. So what do we actually mean by culture? I think for me, it's the ability for someone in an organization to clearly define the values, the vision, the mission of that organization and connect it to their day-to-day activity. So if you can connect, and most importantly, for many of you on this call, you will have teams that are going to be working remote for at least the next 6 months. If you can help them connect with your agency's purpose, like why do you exist? Are you super clear on that? And how do you unlock the potential kind of in your business? So I think, yeah, the three things that we say about sort of purpose, clarity is to make sure that there's clarity of vision, number one. Number two is making sure that there's clarity in communication. So being super clear, how can you connect the dots for your customers and your team about the purpose of why you exist? So we exist to accelerate the potential and value of digital, creative and tech businesses. So we hold up that mirror every single time we do a webinar, every time we do an in-person event, every time we do a consulting session. Are we delivering on that promise that we are looking and seeking to do? Are we bringing the clarity? And then finally, it's clarity for your community. So we're in this community today. There's a group of us. We're collaborators, aren't we? We're seeking the best for each other's businesses. We're seeking to unlock the potentials of each other's businesses. So those people around you, knowing and understanding that there are ways to kind of communicate and that there is a community of other people around you is so, so important.
So, you know, I mean, completely bang on. How you've worked with so many businesses remotely, I'm guessing over the last 6 months. How are the good businesses managing this? Because I guess managing it has never been harder, you know, from a remote perspective.
Yeah, I would say for most people on this call, you'll probably be a visionary leader. So you're living in next year already. You've already mapped out the holiday you probably can't have next summer, if you're like me, and mourning that. But vision right now isn't the most helpful currency that we're finding leaders are using. What we're finding and what we're coaching and mentoring on is actually the clarity of what matters today, what matters tomorrow, what matters this week. So moving from being vision-led for months or years ahead, which is what, you know, we spend our lives doing, is helping people imagine better futures, both commercially and creatively. What we're finding time and time again is that we are all overwhelmed. You know, you'll find all of us on good days and bad days, depending on how our families are, what our structures are, what's happening in our client portfolio, what the bank balance looks like. But that's just normal life. But add to that, living in this level of uncertainty, of this constant grief of, oh, we could go to the gym yesterday, now we can't. Oh, we could go out for a meal now with our friends, now we can't. Oh, we can't see our loved ones. So what we're really finding is those leaders that are spending time to think through, how do you connect what we are doing right now into manageable, understandable work packages, I guess is the best way to put it, with their teams. The other two pieces that we're seeing to keep that energy high is kind of having buddy systems, so that, you know, Adam and I would be in constant contact if we were colleagues in the same firm, is just you know that that person has got your back, that you're there, that you're working with them. And then finally, I think it's, for us leaders, this is a difficult one to swallow, but lowering expectations. I think this is not the season to be driving out significant behavior change. Now, I'm not saying don't manage underperformance. That is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is just kind of cut everyone a little bit more slack. Just be a little bit kinder, more compassionate in the way that you communicate and work with people. So hopefully that sets the scene, Adam. And as I said, very happy to dive into questions as and when they come.
Yeah. So I mean, the simple question is, why should we care? You know, why should we care about culture? It's a word that's bandied about a lot. Obviously, you're focusing a lot on this in your work. You know, what's the reason? What are the benefits and the outcomes?
For me, I would say that individuals, so employees that are connected to a company's purpose and understand why they do what they do and why it matters, they are more loyal, they're more effective in the role that they perform, and they're better advocates. So whether they're in sales or not. So one of the businesses we work for, very large software technology business, working in software within young people. So, you know, for that leader, being able to communicate so clearly at this moment in time, every time we put a new release together, that has a significant chance of improving a 16 to 19-year-old's chance of getting their first job. And that's worth spending an extra bit of time testing your code, because we all know that, you know, the figures change every day in the press, don't they? But there are millions of young people that have been so hard hit through this pandemic. So rather than just working for a software company, what she's done so elegantly is connected it to, but that makes a difference to that individual. So if we can get another person into, you know, the economic supply chain, into a role, into a job, then let's make sure that the releases that we do on this software platform are as important as possible. So it moves it from task-based into much more, you know, focused around the difference you make through the work that you do.
So is now the time that we should revisit that and actually open the can of worms to go through that? Or are we in a phase where we just need to double down on what we've kind of agreed previously?
It's a brilliant question. I would say both and. So I think the key at the moment is stabilization of your operations. And there'll be people on this call whose businesses are flying. So there are businesses out there that are absolutely thriving during this environment, but that doesn't mean they're not operating in a deeply uncertain market. So what I wouldn't say is, you know, call an all team meeting of 60 people next Friday and start saying, we're going to relook at our vision and mission and values. What I would say is, if you're not au fait with what you did create maybe in the past, dust it off, maybe look at it as a senior leadership team, and then start to think through, how do we communicate this back out? If this is still true for us, how do we make it relevant, meaningful and purposeful to make connections? And this is all driven with both a creative and a commercial agenda. And I need to be really clear there, Adam. This isn't kind of wishy-washy of like, oh, let's, you know, stand around the Christmas tree and work out what we stand for and sing Kumbaya. This is around actually those businesses that can be super, super clear about what they stand for and why they matter.
Can you give us any examples of those, Matt?
Yeah, so one business that kind of springs to mind is, some people might have heard of it. If you have in chat, put a thumbs up. Hyatt Denim. So they're a couple that live in West Wales, down in Cardigan, and David was the founder, or one of the youngest ever directors to work at Saatchi's, and worked as a copywriter. Relocated back to his hometown of Cardigan and ran a number of successful fashion businesses that he exited and did extremely well from it. But the thing that, as a serial entrepreneur, he spotted and always wanted to own a jeans company. So in Cardigan, the biggest manufacturer of jeans in the UK was based in Cardigan, employing over 500 full-time people. One day, corporate business just made a decision, we're not manufacturing jeans in the UK anymore. That factory was shut overnight. And David and his family kind of were mourning that on behalf of their town, wanted to start to make jeans themselves as a fashion brand. And just to give you context, these jeans for sell between sort of 180 and 280 pounds a pair. It's a wait time of 6 weeks to get a pair. They are always sold out. It's an artisan craft, highly profitable business. And their mission and purpose is, we want to get our town to make jeans again. And he's connected it right into the heart of the community that he works in. Now, there aren't tons of people buying his jeans from there, but what he's created is a narrative and a story which attracts the world's best people to come and work for them and relocate. It attracts a story and a narrative that, for example, some of the Royals have worn pairs which have then kind of gone global on Instagram, because it's created this story of regeneration, but a heartfelt regeneration. So I think that's just a great example where you see a business grabbing this stuff and actually making it work for them.
Okay, I think it would be good to ask the audience at this point, which brands do we all feel have, a brilliant culture, and why? I think I prefer the answers apart from maybe the big 5 tech companies, because I think they let's stay away from those. So has anyone got any good input in that?
We can sit it out, Adam. So I'm happy.
We can sit it out. Patagonia from Craig. Yeah, I listened to a great podcast on Patagonia. Actually, I think they were on the How I Built This podcast. The Ben and Jerry's guys are really interesting. Going through that and listening to their backstory. Any others? Timpson's, yeah,
great one.
Great one, yeah.
I had the privilege of chatting to James, the chief exec, that'll be a good few years ago, at their head office in Manchester, around the amazing work that they do with ex-offenders. And I said, you must be the biggest employer of ex-offenders in the UK. He said, oh, no, Tesco's are. It's just we know that we are.
Okay, we've got Iceland, we've got Patagonia. I think Deb's just going to name all the employee-owned companies. I think there's going to be a few of those. But I think it comes very nicely later on onto Deb's talk, really, about employee ownership. But when we talk about culture and commercials, there are some companies that have done really well in the last 6 months, and some companies have struggled. You've worked with tons of companies over the last 6 months. You'll have seen both sides. What's the difference?
So the businesses that are out there outstripping the market, they acted really early when they saw that there was a significant financial challenge coming towards them, and a political threat and a health-related threat that no one has ever traded through. So they were super quick to restructure themselves, to reduce costs, to reduce overhead. So lots of things that people will have done, that I'm sure on this call. But the thing that stood out, Adam, was they ensured that their proposition, e.g., what do they say on their website when you land on it, was it still razor sharp and relevant to their customers? So let me give you an example.
It was clear.
Yeah. So we burn calories, don't we, trying to understand things. The more complex something is, the more calories we burn. So what the companies that have kind of just thrived and accelerated through is, they've pivoted to delivering online. Yes, they've used all those tools. Yes, they maybe had a solid, good client base. But really what they've done is reconnected their proposition super clearly to the end needs, to the pain point of their customers. So, if we kind of went on each other's websites now and just, saw the we do this, and we are based in Manchester, and we won this award, and there's just too many we's there. What we want to hear is actually, we helped X sports brand sell more footballs to X number of fans. That's what a marketing manager at a sports brand wants to hear. Because they'll go, oh, that pain point. You understand that actually retailing now through Amazon and through the main retailers is a really complex thing to do. And therefore you want to make a connection. So I guess there's a couple of examples that I would give of how to do this well. So the first is, we work with a number of really, craft artisan-led film businesses. And, pre-pandemic, they would probably say in an elevator, if you ask them, what do you do? Oh, they just say, we make films. Like, that's it. You know, they weren't super sharp on their positioning on why it mattered. And now they would say, oh, we produce content that moves humans to action through the power of film. So if they're talking to Cancer Research UK, where they're saying, look, the noise in the marketplace for fundraising and the sensitivities of fundraising at the moment, with so much uncertainty, deprivation, job losses, how do we walk that balance to make that human impact? I don't know if people have seen, but British Heart Foundation have done this really well. Just in the last week, they've launched a lot of campaign work, which I just think has been done so sensitively. And I think they're asking for £3, but it's just really stood out of they're just emotively using the campaigns to connect with their end audience.
What's really interesting about that though, Matt, is the investment world, you know, which I have quite a lot of experience on, and the acquirer world are always interested in niche businesses. Yeah. Always interested in it. You know, they talk about as they have a checklist, and it's always, you know, 1 to 5. Is it a niche business in a niche sector?
Yep. Yeah. Have they got depth in a sector?
Yeah.
That the barriers to entry just become so high. Yeah. So another example is, you know, another business we worked with. You know, we design and build websites. How many people say that on their website? And you know, through helping them and sort of sherpering them through that process of, well, actually, what makes more difference and what will make you stand out? And they landed on, we make it easier and more enjoyable to buy and sell online. So they were already just then connecting to I need to put an e-commerce store up because our market, we've had to shut, we've had to do this, we've had to do that. So I think connecting those two kind of the proposition really clearly in people's minds is so important to the commercial success. And can I just pick up, Adam, on that one point you made? Yeah. Sectors, you know, those that have got sector depth are, you know, unless you're in hospitality, travel, you know, those sectors that have been decimated. Those that have got sector depth are finding new projects, are finding new ways to work with companies, and are really accelerating. So I would say out of, you know, we work with hundreds of companies in Europe, in the UK, and in the States, and those that are thriving have nailed that proposition, sector, and clarity of briefing.
Yeah, great insight. We've got a question, so let's get straight in. What are your thoughts on B Corp? I mean, I've seen this a lot recently. You will have come across this a lot. So what are your thoughts on that, Matt?
I'm a huge fan and advocate. We're going through it as an organisation ourselves at the moment. We work quite closely with a business called Us2, which is a digital product studio. Those guys went through it probably 12 months ago. I think if anyone started to go through the process, if it does nothing else, it will challenge your thinking around your supply chain, around your recruitment processes. And I believe it's kind of a movement that's got a level of caliber and gravitas. So Unilever are not becoming a B Corp themselves, but they are, you know, their sub-brands are actually becoming B Corp. So for me, I'm a huge fan. I'd be interested in chat. What's the individual's perspective? Positive, negative?
Yeah, Deb said, increasing number of employee-owned businesses now moving to B Corp, highly complementary to the employee ownership model. Yeah, I mean, in our sector, we're seeing a lot of companies move to B Corp, and I've come across a lot of B Corp companies. It can only be a positive thing, can't it? You know, yeah. People engaging in these kind of standards can only be a good thing. Let's just switch gears, you know, because I've got a question that, you know, I'll always be selfish and ask questions that are on my mind. How do you stay effective and innovative with your craft, you know, in a very difficult time?
Oh, good question. So the definition of craft in my mind, Adam, would be, I guess, the quality of the output of the work that we are doing. So whether that being a copywriter that's writing pinpoint copy that touches the human emotion, or whether it being a digital product studio doing pixel perfect design, or a filmmaker making something so emotive that we lean in. I think for me, there's a whole host of things that we need to be taking really seriously as leaders in the field. And I think one is making sure that we build in extra time for the work. I felt I've got a sort of a pitch effectively in about 10 days time. And I'm very close to picking up the phone to the client and asking for a 1-week extension, because it feels it's a very big, meaty piece of work. And it feels like it could be sort of rushed. And I think if you've got the caliber, if you've got the relationship currency with key clients, now I'm not saying turn work down, but making sure you build enough time into the work that you're producing is so, so important.
Does that not feed through to the culture bit as well? Because it's probably not a good time to heap loads of pressure onto your team, you know?
No, and I think, yeah, the more breathing space we can have, I think right now is important. I think the second thing that I would kind of layer on that is just to make sure that the way you, I guess, manage client expectations is going to be so, so important. So let me give you a quick example. I'm recognizing we've got limited time. So I guess someone just chuck into chat if you've heard the phrase, don't send a proposal orphaned. So what we would mean by that is never ever send a request out back to a client with a, here's some creative, here's some pricing, here's some references, get back to us. You always want to, when the inbound lead comes in, do a phone call with them. If they won't take your phone call, then probably they've pre-qualified themselves out that you are just one of 10 people that are going to be on the list. So you need to be really, really super sharp in your pre-qual. But if you have pre-qualled them and they feel like a great fit for you, as part of that process, you just say to them, so we don't actually send proposals out kind of without taking you through them. So can we get a slot in your diary, maybe next Thursday at 2 o'clock? So you're then just putting that emphasis to say, actually, is this going to be a partnership and relationship? Or is this just you're getting a quote off me and I'll then never hear from you and I'll keep mailing you and you'll just blind me? So what we say is, like, never send a commercial proposal orphaned. You wouldn't let a little child out on the road. So, like, make sure that your IP and your work is protected. I would also now say that the same about work. Don't just send over work. Don't just send over wireframes. Say to them, look, we've got to a brilliant point. We're really happy with X, Y, and Z, but we do need to take you through it. So can we have a call tomorrow at 2 o'clock? And I think making sure that you build that into your rhythms will make a big, big difference.
Yeah, great point. Great point. And I think we're done, and we'll pass over to Paul, who's very passionate about that topic in particular.
Yeah.
Paul, do you agree with that?
Built a whole software product around that psychology. Yeah, it's just, you know, as Matt says, if you don't put that time in the diary with the client, they'll get caught up with 1,000 other things going on in their world, and it's so much more efficient to say none of us are going to worry about it for the next 7 days, and then we'll talk about it at 3:30 next Thursday, rather than all that chasing back and forth and trying to understand and interpret each other's emails. Video is much better. And also, it's a false economy to think that you don't need to have that video call because it's going to take an hour of your day, because you'll spend way more than an hour trying to get in touch with them with all the admin back and forth. And on top of that as well, your competitors are probably not doing it. So it gives you competitive advantage. If they are going for 10 proposals, be the one that picks up the phone, has the video call, describes things in a refreshing way that shows that you actually care as well. You're doing this professionally. So yeah. Very good. Yeah, we've got agreement from Craig and Andrew. That's very good to see. So thank you, Matt. Are you okay to hang around?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. So in about 25 minutes, we'll bring Matt back on. So if anyone thinks of any other questions between now and then just pop them into the chat, and I'll get them ready for the end. So thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate you doing that for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deb and Tim, or just Deb initially, if that's the case, just slot your videos on for us. Thank you very much. So we were asked, as I say last time, to put something on employee ownership. So we went straight for the jugular and got the chairperson of the Employee Ownership Association. So delighted to have Deb here today. in no way are map or bulletproof, suggesting that employee ownership is the way that your business should go. Obviously, it's one of a number of options that you have for exiting your business. But what I would say is that you all will, whether you like it or not, exit your business one day. So carried on this theme of just thinking about different ways that you might do that, whether that be through a trade sale, whether it be through private equity, management buyout, or employee ownership. And so Deb's come on today to explain what employee ownership is and how it might work. And if any of you are interested in understanding it further, obviously we can only cover so much in a short amount of time today. But Tim's here, also of a client of MAP and the Employee Ownership Association, to talk about the journey that he's been on over the last few years with his business. So without further ado, over to you, Deb.
Thanks, Paul. And you've elevated me slightly because I'm not the chair of the EOA, I'm chief exec, but never mind. So yeah, thanks for inviting me. Fascinating conversation actually earlier on with Matt. I really enjoyed that. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time, like a couple of minutes, telling you a little bit about employee ownership and the EOA, and then as I said, I'm going to introduce Tim from Zircon, because he's actually done this. So he's got the war wounds and the t-shirt to prove it. And I thought it would be helpful just for him and I to have a bit of a chat around what he did and why he did it. So the Employee Ownership Association, we're a not-for-profit membership organisation, and going back to our purpose is to create more businesses in the UK that are employee-owned, because we believe employee ownership is a better form of business, and we can talk a little bit more later on about why that's the case. We represent about 420 organisations, and they're either businesses like yours that might be exploring it, thinking about it, curious about it, or businesses that have already done it and are keen to continue to ensure that they maximise the advantages of it by learning from each other. The sector's worth somewhere in the region of 30 billion a year. There are about 500 businesses employing around 200,000 people. So most people have heard of the John Lewis Partnership, but of course there's many more businesses now that are employee owned. Some of the more recent ones you might have heard of because you'll have read about them in the press. Riverford Organics down in the southwest, Aardman Animations, part of this sector of the economy. So Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep, etc. Or if you remember him, Morph, who was my favourite character from the Aardman Studios. And most recently, Richer Sounds. So they hit the headlines, not least because when Julian Richer sold the business to a trust, he then gave £3 million of the proceeds of that back to the employees in bonuses, equivalent to a certain amount for each year that people had been there. So it's a growing phenomenon in terms of a model for handing ownership at the point at which an owner wants to leave the business, and it's growing at pace. The reason it's growing is really because there's been a lot of advocacy for it and support of it, particularly by the government and by the professional services sector. Obviously, we've also been running a campaign of awareness raising, but the government's intervention into this market came back in 2012. There was a review of employee ownership and its opportunity post the 2008 crash. That then led in 2014 to the government legislation around something called the Employee Ownership Trust, which Adam mentioned earlier on. So the Employee Ownership Trust is a particular type of trust where the employees are the beneficiaries of whatever equity that trust owns. And along with that trust came some very appealing incentives. So if you as an owner transfer more than 50.1% of the equity of your business into an employee ownership trust, you don't pay any capital gains tax on the proceeds of that sale. So as was said earlier, tax is not the only reason to do this, but if you are planning an exit and your business is culturally aligned with the values of employee ownership, then certainly this model is one that could be attractive. There's also a financial benefit to the employees because through that trust structure, employees can also receive a £3,600 tax-free bonus every year. So, so that's what it is in terms of the EOT. But what it is, and picking up on what was talked about just now by Matt, is it's not only about giving people a stake in a business, it's also about giving them a say. So it's really about the culture of the organisation as well. It's particularly attractive, as I said earlier, for succession. So business owners who are looking to exit their business, they want to do it on their terms, so they may not want to leave immediately. They want to continue and leave a legacy in the business, and they want to preserve the jobs. And you know, they may want to stay around for a few years, where with a trade sale you tend to have to leave straight away. So it's particularly attractive to some business owners, not every business owner. Our role in all of that as the EOA, as I said earlier, is to support business owners who are looking at employee ownership, signpost them to best advice, connect them in with the community of other employee-owned businesses so they can learn from what others have done. So I think I've probably just given you that bit of overview, but what I want to do now is welcome Tim. I don't know if Tim's there. I can't see him. Tim, are you with me?
Don't worry.
Yeah, hi. Okay, so Tim and I had a chat yesterday. Tim is the Managing Director of Zircon, so an EOA member, and also very connected into this group of businesses as well. So we thought what we'd do, didn't we, Tim? We thought we'd have a conversation between the two of us. We thought that would draw out the story of Zircon's transition. And as was mentioned earlier by Paul, we'll then do some Q&A at the end, if that's all right. So, so Tim, why don't you start by telling everybody about the journey? So, you know, what happened? Why did employee ownership figure? When did it happen, and how did it happen?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, thanks, Deb, and thanks a lot to Paul for inviting us on to do this today, because we always love to tell our story. Just in case you don't know, we too are a digital marketing agency, focused on B2B, based over on the Wirral, and currently about 15 people. So it gives you an idea of scope and scale. Deb talks about Employee Ownership Association. You've got John Lewis at one end, and you've got people like us towards the other end of the organisation. So it's not just about big businesses. So it's something to think seriously about. Our story, we're 21 years old this year. And after about 18 years, our founder, JP Simpson, decided that he wanted to pass the business on and to look for his exit. And it's interesting, a lot of talk about exit becoming more prolific at the moment. But he wanted to ensure that the business had a sustainable future. I've been through both a trade sale and an acquisition route, so I know some of the bear pits that lie down those routes, and what can happen to you 2 years in, especially when you're chasing an earn-out, etc. And he didn't want to particularly go that route. There wasn't the scope for an MBO within the business, so employee ownership started to become part of the conversation, and being a likely route to pass the business on to the employees, maintain a sustainable future. I came in, the process started probably about three and a half years ago. We transitioned to fully employee owned just over 2 years ago, and I came in prior to that to manage and transition the business through that experience, and then to run the business through this first iteration of employee ownership. And I think there's two distinct sides to that journey, and I'm sure you'll have questions on both of them. We talk very much about culture today and purpose. There's a mechanical side of getting you through that journey, the compliance, the legal, all the accounting regulations, and then there's the bit about how it makes you feel and what you think about employee ownership and how it changes hearts and minds within the business as well. So there are two very distinct sides to it.
One's the transaction and one's the transition, isn't it? So technical transaction. So just to be clear, you came on board, you led that transaction, and JP transferred 100%. So he sold 100% of the equity into an employee ownership trust. That's
correct, 100% across. We did it on the basis of deferred consideration as well. So he also was able to go from being the the founder and the owner operator of the business, and he's now stepped out and still very involved. He's our chairman, he's a non-exec, and he also sits on the trust board that's also in place to ensure that we're always behaving in the best interests of the shareholders, and the shareholders are now the employees through the trust. So there's a fundamental difference there.
So maybe we can talk now about, so what's happened since then? So that was 3 years ago. Is that 3 years ago? Yeah, 2 years?
Just up to a bit now, yeah. And I think it's really interesting. I think you go through, you talk about the transactional size of things, and I think it's like anything, even the same as when you're going through an M&A or you're going through any kind of large scale business process. You get very wound up in it, and you get a whole energy that goes alongside it. And March the 28th, we signed all the paperwork eventually. So we came back into the office on March the 29th, and it was all the same. Nothing had changed. But we started using the phrase around the business that everything's changed, but nothing's changed. We're the same people. We've got the same client base. We've got the same jobs to do. We're in the same place. We've all got the same roles to perform, but now we're doing it for ourselves, because ultimately we all have an equal share in the profit that's generated by the business going forward. So it's a very, very different mindset that people have, and it's quite hard actually to I suppose understand how people have different thoughts, feelings and emotions around that. Some people, and you'll know them all within your businesses, some people absolutely grab that, thrive on it and live off it. Some people are actually quite challenged, scared and threatened by it, because suddenly they've gone from being an employee that's maybe told what to do on a daily basis, come in, turn the handle, as you say so often, turn the handle, come in, come out again, to now, hang on a minute, I'm an owner of a business. Is my house, you go through this whole scenario about explaining to people that suddenly, no, your house is not on the line. Don't worry about it. There's only upsides to employee ownership as an employee owner, but you have to go through and explain things to people really clearly so they understand that. So there's a really big piece to do around internal comms, employee comms. Fortunately, we're a comms agency. We're allegedly quite good at that. But sometimes you get the whole situation of cobbler's shoes, don't you? That you just assume that everybody is as passionate about it as you are. So we maybe went through a loop on that, that we needed to revisit.
Yeah. So what do you, now you can reflect on 2 years, have you got any examples that you could share about where you've noticed there's been an impact of employee ownership on the business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talk about, we always want to see cold, hard, tangible results for our efforts, don't we? And I think they come over time. I think we've seen we do all the classic things. We do staff surveys. We check our engagement, and on all our engagement scores have gone up in the period that we've been employee owned. And I think you'd expect that to happen. There's it's always the really small things, isn't it? And I think when I came to it, like everybody, I was kind of maybe looking for the big thing, the big change, everything to be suddenly different, and it wasn't. We've sat, I think, probably about 9-10 months in, and we were sat in a meeting room in our building, and somebody walked out of the meeting, it was an internal meeting, staff only. Somebody walked out of the meeting and just flicked the lights off. So we talk in our business about the light switch moment, not a light bulb moment. And they walked out, flicked the light switch off while we were still finishing up a meeting. And I said, well, what do you do that for? I said, well, because it's the electricity, and the electricity costs money, and money comes off our bottom line, and our bottom line is my profit share come January. And it was a great little moment, because it suddenly, you could see that it was starting to hit home. It was starting to make a difference. I think other things happen along the way. I think the guys feel they maybe have permission to do things, to ask things that maybe they wouldn't have asked before when it was just a founder-led business. And there's nothing wrong with that model, and there was nothing negative about that. But maybe they felt differently. Now they had the right which they absolutely do have the right to ask more questions about the business, because it's their business and they have a stake in it. So I think those things happen, and they brought some brilliant ideas to the table that I think they thought maybe in the past that possibly wouldn't have got changed, and we changed and adopted some ideas that the guys brought to the table. So it's the little things that happen along the way that give you the signpost that there's positive change happening.
So they're behavioural changes, which I guess, some of that was, I guess, what Matt was mentioning earlier on, so it's just the small little behavioural changes. But can you, without giving away any trade secrets, can you talk about what the impact's been on the bottom line?
Yeah, I think we'll talk probably currently about pre-COVID, because I think that's when we've got a clearer reading of things. We've absolutely seen efficiency gains, and for us as an agency, that effectively we sell time. So for us to see efficiency gains through higher levels of engagement and understanding, and I think it was Matt talked about connection to purpose, and I think that just wraps it up in a beautiful nutshell for me, because people now understood and understand their purpose, what we're about, what we stand for, and what they can do as part of that. So where they can do things more efficiently, they now understand tangibly the difference it can make. So we've seen, without giving cold hard figures, absolutely, we've seen improvements and profitability improvements along the way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard that story from quite a few different organisations where they'll talk about the common purpose that people now have, and also that shared sense of responsibility to the business. Your example of the light bulb reminds me of a business. It's a manufacturing business in the southwest, and I was talking to the owner-founder who was still in the business for a couple of years after the transition, and his equivalent to the light switch moment was the weeds moment in the car park. So there was a sign with the name of the business on, and every morning he said he would drive into the car park and there was a particular weed that used to grow at the bottom of the sign, and he would be the one that got out the car, picked out the weed, went into the office, and then he noticed that it wasn't there anymore, and he assumed somebody had put some weed killer down or something had happened, and he mentioned it to somebody in the team, and they said, oh no, I took that out. And nobody had ever done that before. And he said it was, he put it down to the fact that suddenly they are now an owner. So they've got that ownership responsibility. And, I think we all know what it feels like to rent a car when you go on holiday. You rent a car, you abuse it for a couple of weeks, you take it back at the airport, you drop it off, it's filthy, it's got sand in the back, the kids, the sandwich boxes from the kids, etc. You don't think a second about washing it out, about, vacuuming it out, because it's not yours, it's somebody else's and you're just using it. Whereas your own car, most of us, I think, probably, they or somebody else in the family takes care of it. And it's the same sort of mentality, I think. So how, just before we finish, because we've got about 20 minutes to do this bit, and I think then there's questions. So in the last so many months, since March the 23rd, I think it was, wasn't it? March the 15th, we all went down to lockdown. What do you think, if anything, has employee ownership helped over the last few months when you've been going through this awful time that we've all been going through?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to be really defined about it, because we don't have any control to measure against, really, do we? Because I don't think any of us have experienced anything like this. I think yes, it has. I think it's that sense of purpose, that sense of that greater degree of engagement to the business and understanding what things mean on a day-to-day basis, and understanding how you can influence things, and the big differences that small things make. I think absolutely, I've certainly felt on my daily, weekly, monthly, fortnightly Zoom calls with the team that the guys are strangely, through being all sat in our front rooms, probably great connected, because we need to be. And that's not the work in the nicest possible way. The work gets done. We know what to do. We understand how to work remotely. We've done that before. We do it. The majority of our clients across the world, we work remotely from them. So that's not an issue. The work happens. it's that greater sense of connection to each other's well-being, and people looking out for each other. And I feel a greater sense of that. And I think that'll be interesting to when we do all return back to a largely however blended office working model, how we maintain that and how we keep that sense of connection that people have got. But let's just get back to the office first, eh?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think everybody recognises that any business, whether it's employee owned or not, most businesses have rallied together in a crisis, and people and teams have come together to do the best for the business. Like you say, the challenge is how do you capture that in normal times? And just to finish off, I guess, I spend quite a lot of time talking to our members on a regular basis about what they're experiencing. And what I've definitely heard is that during this COVID time, and again, it goes back to a lot of the things that Matt was talking about, because these employer businesses have already got a strong shared sense of common purpose, supported by effective employee engagement, which then leads to high levels of trust. These businesses have not really had to change an awful lot in order to adapt to this new environment. And that way of working is ingrained into the culture of the organisation through that shared ownership of having a stake and a say in the business. So I think they've tended to be relatively resilient at this time, and also because they take a long-term view. They're not chasing short-term profit for either shareholder reward, on a quarterly basis. They've tended to have higher levels of financial reserves as well, so they tend to be able to withstand, I think, some of the shocks that the economy has faced and we're still facing. Thanks for that, Tim. That was our fireside chat together, although we're not together and we're not round a fireside, but there you go. Paul, I hope that was what you and your guests today were looking for, and we thought that would just work better than either Tim or I doing a presentation, but we're both here to answer any questions.
Yeah, no, that's great, guys. We could be going on for a little while, which is good if that's okay with you. Obviously, a lot of the focus there was around sort of culture and craft and team spirit, which is the headline of the webinar. But so that was great. But I think it'd be good now to start to maybe discuss some of the topics from like the business owner perspective as well. So I don't want to go too much into Zircon because I don't think it's fair to speak too much about JP and his situation, but generally, I guess, most of the people listening to this now, they are business owners and they'll be trying to imagine what life is like on the other side of this transaction, and particularly if they're giving up 100% of the business. It's great that you got this team that are more incentivized and going forward and growing the business, but what has it been like for the business owners that are on the other side, and suddenly they are, I mean, firstly, from a technical perspective, I guess they can still be in control of the business if they are in control of the trust, can't they? If they're a trustee.
Well, yeah. I mean, do you want me to give a view from?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
I think there's two things going on here. One is the ownership, and one is the leadership. And if you're an owner founder who's led the business and you're leading from the front as a managing director, as most are, what we're talking about here is a change of ownership. So it doesn't suit every business owner to do this, because for some owners, particularly those that have, they've thrived under, an environment which is potentially a little paternalistic, quite command and control, clear leadership, the rest of the team know who to follow and they know why they're following them. And they also are not ready or want to really do a phased exit. This probably isn't going to work, because you heard from Tim, deferred payments is a really effective way of doing this, so that you can phase the payments over a number of years and allow the business to pay it back over a number of years out of profits. But just because there is an ownership structure in place that is shared ownership amongst all the employees, that doesn't mean there isn't still a leadership team. So, the leadership of the business, the vision that is set by that leadership team is still massively important. And employer businesses structurally look very similar in the way they are run to any other privately owned business. It's just that the ownership element sits in a trust, and clearly there is a heightened level of employee engagement. I think some owners do find it really hard, and that stepping back and stepping away and letting others step in and step up is a really hard thing to do. And it's made harder when it's an employee ownership structure, of course, because mainly the owners tend to stay around for a while. So in Tim's case, you've got JP as the chairman, and you know, to relinquish that level of influence and to allow other people to take over for anybody is hard. And so I think some owners do find it hard, and some management teams find it as equally frustrating because they want to step up to that new level of responsibility, but all the while the owner is there, it can feel like, you know, big brother looking over your shoulder, just waiting for you to make a mistake. So it does take a level of honesty and transparency between the exiting owner and the management team to have those honest conversations. So your inference that it's the trust that made the decisions, I think really is not true. The trust is accountable to the beneficiaries, who are the employees. So in that model that I described, but the trust is not necessarily, the trustees are not necessarily the management team. And in a small organisation, of course, the owner founder is probably one of the trustees. The managing director might be one of the trustees, and there's probably an employee representative who's also a trustee. But there is still a clear delineation between the trust and the board. You know, that the trust is there to hold the board to account, not to run the business. If you've got a John Lewis partnership, there's a board with a chairman and directors. They operationally run the business, set the vision, and deliver against a business plan. But then there are a group of trustees who sit on the partnership trust who hold that board to account.
And to be clear, from an ownership perspective, this Zircom have decided to go 100% employee owned, but the rules are that the trust has to own at least 51%. So when we talk about employee owned, just for everyone's understanding, it is on an all employee basis. So every individual becomes a beneficiary of the trust, but the trust doesn't have to own the business 100%, but it does have to own it at least 51%. We've had a good question about the directors that are going to be in place, certainly post transaction, maybe they were before as well, but about incentivizing them in bonus and shares. And we talked about this earlier, Deb, that you know, there are other ways, as we said, about exiting businesses, and there are other ways to incentivize senior members of staff. There are share plans and share option schemes that you can do. If the trust hasn't taken over 100% of the organisation from a shareholding perspective, the other 49% can still be subject to share plans and share options and that kind of thing. So that's still available for the directors that remain. Obviously, any decisions need to be in the best interest still of the shareholders, don't they? But the answer is yes. The remaining directors can be incentivised with both bonuses and shares. Is the answer to that question?
Yeah, and also, as is the case in Richer Sounds, for example, the founder owner has still got shares within the business as well. So he's still got 40% of the shares. If you look at Lush Cosmetics, they've only got 10% in an employee ownership trust, and they expect that to grow to between 25 and 30% over the next few years. They'll probably, the employee ownership trust there will probably never have a majority share ownership, because there's family ownership in there and there's some director ownership. And so their reason for doing it is not succession, it's about growth planning, it's about engaging employees. So the model is entirely flexible around the needs of that business. However, if you want to access the capital gains tax relief that's associated with the EOT, as you said quite rightly, Paul, it's got to be more than 50.1%. So you've got to, there's got to be a controlling interest in the EOT.
That's a really good point you've made there. So trusts existed way before 2014. The difference in 2014 was that you can actually, the existing shareholders can sell to the trust capital gains tax free if you meet the 51% requirement, but you could still sell less of your shares to a trust below the 50% requirement, but you can't get the preferential capital gains tax treatment. When I say preferential, I mean no capital gains tax if it's 51% employee owned.
And there's also the tax-free bonus lump sum every year that can be paid to employees up to 3,600, which is also
for employee owned only.
Yeah, which is valuable for the employee owners, and that's again through the EOT.
Yeah, Bill. What kind of businesses does employee ownership suit?
So over 50% of the employer-owned sector are professional services business. So that's rather in your sector or in architecture, design, civil engineering, IT. So you think about businesses where the assets of the business are actually the people, their talent, their innovation, their skills. It's those types of businesses that are really thriving from this model. The second group, although I say that, is manufacturers. So there's a large number of niche manufacturing businesses that are also using the employee ownership structure, and then retail and wholesaling are the third sector.
Interesting. So obviously service businesses, like you say, all about the people. They want to grow the people, keep the people. What's retention been like at Zircon? Tim, if you don't mind opening up about that. You know, one of the main driving factors for doing this is to retain good people. Has that worked?
Yeah, absolutely. When Debs and I were talking yesterday, actually, we talked about this. You get 60% of people that probably sit in the middle of your group. You get the 20% that I talked about earlier, those people that sit at the top that'll grab it. They'll grab anything new, and they'll grab anything that's going to take the business forward and help it to grow and thrive and prosper. And you'll get another 20% that sit, and they are the guys that are happy to come and turn. Also within there, you may well have that percentage that are disruptive potentially, not a case in our experience, but you've got that in there as well. And change is difficult for people. It's interesting, you talk about it from the outgoing owner's perspective, and everybody thinks about that and talks a lot about the change that happens up here. You've also got all of this stuff, and you've got people that could have been, we were 18 years as a business prior to it going employee owned. And people have been, some people have been around for quite a long time and very happy and comfortable within the structure. So retention for us has been good. We've actually grown in the period. We've added to the employee group. And I would say that employee ownership has been something that absolutely every applicant that I've interviewed has wanted to talk about.
It'll be interesting as well, because obviously the first X period of time after transaction, a lot of the business's profits are being used to pay the deferred consideration. But it'll be in the coming years after that when employees actually start to receive some tangible benefit in the way of cash into the bank account, that maybe some of the 60% will start to move up into the really engaged people, because they actually start to see it and get it. Because it's one of my other questions, just on the same point, Tim, and I'll pass over, sorry, is sort of about financial curiosity and financial literacy of employees, because this is a big change and they might have paid lip service to financial information in the past. So that will start to change, won't it? And you'll need to educate them on the consideration is to come in the future.
I think it's absolutely the next question that I expect always when we do this. I did it at a conference last year, and it's question 2 always: how much, how often, and what do you show the employees when it comes to financial information? Because they now have a greater interest and a stake in it, etc. And you used the word there, which is perfect, and we hadn't set it up at all, but it's about education, because you have within that group, and not just within our business, I talk to plenty of other employee-owned businesses, and you have such a broad range of understanding, experience, and perception of financial terminology, numbers, what those things actually mean. When you actually look, and people within the government don't understand the difference between sales and profit. It's really hard for people that don't deal with those things on a regular basis. So what we did as part of the journey, and we're still doing it, is showing regularly financial information, but we're showing more financial depth with each time we show it. And in between those, so it's quarterly, and in between those times, we're helping people to be more equipped to understand what they're looking at and to see it in context, so they don't just suddenly see a great big green number at the bottom and everything's fantastic, or a great big red one, and everything.
They actually want to understand it now rather than pretend that they do.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and I think, and not just, and this wasn't the case in our business, but in a lot of founder-led businesses, they don't see anything. apart from their payroll on the 26th, they don't see anything. So it's you need to do it in a controlled and contextual manner. Sorry, Deb.
Yeah.
There's a strong business case for sharing financial information and business information generally in any organisation, and we've just culturally not got used to doing it. So there's always this worry that you show people information and for some reason they'll either share it outside the business or they'll interpret something from it. But there's a strong argument which says that, you know, if people don't understand the numbers, you can't expect them to act in the best interests of the business. So if people don't understand what the bottom line means, and why would they if they're not, you know, already intimately involved in the business, how can you expect them to contribute when the MD stands up and says what we need to do is just drive to the bottom line and, you know, reduce our costs and increase our profit. Best example of that I had was a business owner, an employer and business owner, telling me that she'd been in a meeting with all the team, several hundred employees, and they were deciding whether or not they were going to pay a dividend or not, or they were going to pay a bonus. And she was trying, because there was share scheme and a trust at the same time. And as she walked out, she asked one of the team what they had they'd voted for, and she said, "Oh, I voted for a bonus." And she said, "Oh, why did you vote for that?" And she said, "Well, I don't know what a dividend is." And she said it suddenly became apparent to her that the assumption that everybody in the business understood the things that the senior management team and how disruptive that was. And the second point I wanted to make was just on your point about recruitment. It links back to Matt's point earlier on about purpose. So we all know that the next generation of workers are much more interested in purpose-led businesses, value-led businesses, the B Corps movement, the impact of the Sustainable Development Goals, the impact of the ESG reporting. So if you're a business that can demonstrate much more clearly a level of transparency and clear purpose, you are going to attract the best talent from young people. That's what they're looking for. And the reliance on financial reward is not a guarantee. So, you know, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that at this moment in time, you know, when most businesses are struggling, and even if your business isn't, you're still thinking about the future and probably wanting to bank a bit more in your reserves. You can't rely on bonuses and or any sort of financial incentive. So what you have to do is appeal to people's values and working in a business that they actually care about.
How many deals of Employee Ownership Association done over the last? When were you formed?
41 years ago, actually. So I've not been here for 41 years. Obviously, I joined 8 years ago. I mean, we don't actually do the transactions. We're not lawyers or accountants. So we help businesses along the way and support and advise. The interesting thing is in the last 6 months, we've seen a huge uptake in inquiry about employee ownership, particularly from business owners who maybe not at an age where they'd normally be thinking about succession. So they're only early 40s and they're thinking, you know, this was a long way off my agenda. Actually, the pandemic has made them think about their own personal mortality and the resilience of the business and how we put things in place now, because you can enact an employee ownership now without any intention of leaving for 10 years. That's the beauty of it. You can start the process. What that actually does is it gives the employees more certainty about what your plan is. Because, you know, employees who sit in a business watching an owner getting into their 50s, then into their 60s, and there's no public talk about what's going to happen, they're more likely to leave because they don't feel like they've got a future. You know, and particularly the best people are going to leave first. Because if they're not hearing anything of any confidence building about the future of the business, and yet they can see the owner getting older and not making any plans, it's quite disconcerting. Yeah.
Have you got an example? Because obviously we've been very positive about it, which is good. Have you got an example of any business owners who have done this and regretted it afterwards?
Not regretted. I mean, I've not heard of any business trying to unpick it and reverse it. I certainly know business owners who have not taken advice. So what they've done is they've focused completely on the transaction, which is the point Tim was saying. The physical transaction of working with accountants and lawyers to get you across the line, honestly, is quite straightforward. It's no more complicated than a management buyout or a trade sale. In fact, it's easier than a trade sale. You have two opposing parties. But where they've not taken advice is where they've not thought hard enough about how do you bring that to life. So therefore, they don't then benefit in the way that they had expected to benefit. So I can point at lots of stories of businesses that immediately after becoming employer-owned, I'm talking within the first 12 months, experienced improved profitability, for example. But that's because they immediately put effort into bringing it to life for the employee owners. And that's not about sharing profits, because you don't do that normally in the first couple of years, as you quite rightly said, Paul, because you're paying back deferred payments. Although the deal can be structured in such a way that the deferred payments only kick in when a certain amount of revenue has been profitably generated. But they put effort into bringing it to life for the employees. So there's something about, as Tim said, nothing changed and everything changed. And there's something about sustainability and continuity, which in itself is very appealing. Because, a trade sale could change everything dramatically for the worst.
Yeah.
However, if you're really going to benefit from employee ownership, you really need to put some effort into thinking more about the cultural stuff that Matt was talking about. How do we make this real? How do we breathe life into this? So if employee ownership is about giving people a stake and a say, how do we bring that second piece to life? How do we listen to the employee voices, but how do we do it in a way that's appropriate? So we're not giving them the keys to the firm and saying, right, you make all the decisions. That's not what employee ownership is about. As I said earlier, you've got a board, you've got a management team, you've got accountabilities, you've got responsibility. But how do you bring their voice into it so that, as Tim suggested, people realise they now have got permission to come up with great ideas. They have got permission to innovate in their workspace. They have got, permission to actually think like owners. So how do you do that? Because that doesn't happen automatically. If you've worked in a business for 20 years like Zircon was, where you've had a strong owner founder leading the business, you can't just expect the next day to everybody to feel empowered. You've got to put some effort into that. If you put the effort in, you see the results. So where I've seen disappointment is where owners have been surprised that hasn't just happened. And, educational literacy that you talked about earlier and the business literacy and understanding part of that.
Yeah, right, we've got quite a few more questions to get through. I'm going to come on to Anthony first. But Matt, if you did want to come back on, that's absolutely fine, because Matt's got a question himself and other people might have questions for Matt. So feel free to switch your video on, Matt, and we can help you with your question in a moment. But Anthony's been waiting patiently for a while, and we've only lost one person since the start of the webinar. So we'll keep going as long as you listen to us. Anthony's question, probably for you, Deb, is, are all employees included by default from day zero?
So if you use an employee ownership trust model, that model is predicated on all employees, that's people with an employment contract. So you can determine whether that's full-time, part-time, whatever you want, but they've got to have an employment contract with the business. As far as the trust is concerned, they are all equal and equivalent beneficiaries. You could apply something about they can't become a qualifying employee until, say, they've gone through a probation period, for example. But eventually, everybody who's an employee is an equal and equivalent beneficiary. You then determine from a financial perspective if it's about distributing financial rewards, on what basis that happens. And again, that's down to you to determine. But whatever you determine, it's done equal and equivalently. So if it's a bonus structure based on a percentage of salary, it's everybody who's a beneficiary of the trust. Doesn't stop you also applying discretional bonus systems, for example, for salespeople or for senior managers, or as you said earlier, Paul, having share option plans or EMI plans in place as well. Yeah,
okay, brilliant, thank you. Someone else has just said daft question, but it's not a daft question, but what happens when people leave?
There is a saying, naked in, naked out. So if you are a beneficiary of a trust, when you join and you're a beneficiary. When you leave, you leave. You don't have a share in your name as a beneficiary of a trust. So the John Lewis Partnership, 83,000 people, whilst they are employed, they're all beneficiaries. If you leave with nothing. Unlike if you were purchasing shares, which you can also do in an employee ownership structure, we haven't talked about that at all. But if you purchase shares through an all-employee share scheme, which many of these businesses have alongside a trust, so you can purchase shares. When you leave, you normally have to sell the shares back to the business because it's an internal marketplace. Otherwise, you dilute the share options.
Yeah. And just to be really simplistic on that, what we're saying is that as under this employee-owned trust mechanism, you're a beneficiary of a trust that owns shares in a limited company. You're not a shareholder in the limited company, which therefore means you've not got the complexities of, like you say, share transfers if you were to leave, and tax implications and legal implications on any of that. Got it, right? She said, got it. That's good. So Matt's question was about, we talked about this earlier as well, actually, funnily enough, but it's about the business being bought back out, so the trust being bought out. So we talked earlier, didn't we, about the fact that the trust could still make a decision to sell the company or to sell its shares in the company. Matt, were you looking at that from a selling it back to the original founder or a third party sale?
I guess twofold there, but it'd be really interesting to explore this one. So let's say Ardman, which is obviously just fantastic to see, for the sector to see that, one of the UK's greatest exporter to choose this route for its exit. If Netflix wanted to buy Ardman in 10 years' time, can it buy it from the trust?
It's up to the trustees. So, and also up to actually the articles. So some businesses put clauses in the articles of the business that says it can never be sold. Mm-hmm. Some will preserve a golden share, which might be in the hands of the previous owner, could be in the hands of the current MD, could be in the hands of the chair of the trustees. And what these businesses tend to do is quite often they're driven by quite visionary owners who have a clear view of what they think the future should be. And I'm sort of on the fence about this, because if it's my business and then I sell it to a trust, I'm empowering the trust with the future. I should empower the trustees to have a voice in, if there's a fantastic deal offered in the future for the business, which is going to benefit all of the employees, why would I want to stop that happening? So why can I stop that? Is that just about my ego? I want this business to carry on with my name above the door forever. I have to say, most business owners who go down this route are not thinking at any point about that. They're normally thinking, this is a way to sustain jobs. This is a way to sustain the legacy of the business, to support clients for the longer term. Often, like many of the people listening today, they will be linked into the local supply chain. So it's about supporting the region that they're based in as well.
I think Matt's is a good example, though, because it could be the employees could want to be part of Netflix, couldn't they? So they could want to sell and still be employed by that bigger business, and they might like the idea of that.
If I could just jump in for a sec, because another way of looking at that is you can write into the articles that the business can only do things like merger, acquisition, sale, if a percentage or even all of the employees agree to it. So actually they could be that empowered. They have the say. So the golden share almost is in the hands of all the beneficiaries.
Deb, just a follow-up question. Could a existing management team do an MBO of the business out of a trust in 15 years' time, because they go, actually, we want to take this back into private ownership for various different reasons? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, well, that's no different to a sale. It's just a sale to a group of people. So yeah, it's completely possible. I mean, I think the interesting thing is the EOT has been used up till now predominantly for an owner just to transfer their ownership into an EOT. I think there's an interesting emerging model of partly in an EOT and partly in the hands of a management team as well, through some sort of MBO model. And that sort of hybrid model has always been there. I just think I think there's potentially an appetite for that in certain sectors. But the thing about this is it is incredibly flexible. It's quite a simple concept to get your head around. You can either sell to a trust where the shares are in there for the beneficiaries or the employees. You can sell to a share scheme. So, you can sell your shares into another form of trust, but then that's distributed through a share scheme amongst all the employees. Or you can do a hybrid model. And that hybrid can also involve founder-owner shares staying in the business if it's a family-owned business, for example, or a management team taking a portion of the shares as well. So it's incredibly flexible. The real benefit is if if you put an element of shares, a portion to a group of employees, it drives, and all the evidence shows, it drives discretional effort, which then results in higher levels of financial performance. It's a way of recruiting people into the business based on that shared ownership ethos, and it's a way of retaining people. And it generally leads to better levels of transparency around governance and information sharing and higher levels of employee engagement. So it delivers all of that, and it can deliver that even at modest levels of employee ownership. It doesn't have to be 50%, 60, 100%. It can deliver that at 10, 20, 30%. Because a lot of it is to do with the complementary culture that exists alongside the ownership structure. So it's not just about the structure, it's also about the culture.
Mentioned governance there. What's the governance of the trust? So how many trustees, what's the minimum number of trustees, and how do they make decisions?
So the trust structure is a traditional standard legal trust structure. There are limitations on exploitation of this model, which mean that if you are a business only of, say, 6 or 7 people, the ownership of the trustees can't be disproportionately represented by the original owners.
Oh, yeah. 40% or something I saw,
Yeah, there isn't any limit on, and I personally think there probably should be, on whether or not you have an employee director on the trust. So my view would be that you should have an employee director on the trust. So that would be either an appointed or an elected one. So in the first couple of years of an employee transaction, what tends to happen is the managing director or the founder owner or a combination of the two might elect somebody themselves. So they'll appoint somebody from the workforce that they think has got the appropriate level of skills. In many businesses, it's straight away it's elected.
Yeah.
The rules of engagement are set out in the articles of the trust. But I go back to what I said earlier, the trustees are not running the business. The management team, the board of directors, there's still a board of directors somewhere that is running that business. The trust is not running the business, and the trust is holding the board to account to run the business in the best interests of the employees. Yeah,
but the trust can vote, can't they, on significant business?
Yeah, but again, that depends how the articles are constructed. So, there's a, as Tim said earlier, the articles give quite a high degree of flexibility to ensure that there is appropriate level of governance between the trust and the board.
Yeah, bro. So there's only one more question that we've not answered, and this allows us to wrap up nicely as well, which is just what's the best way for people to start looking at this?
Oh, what a great question. Thank you for asking that, whoever asked that, Paul.
That is real. I've not pitched that. That's real.
As well. Thank you to whoever asked it. You can go on the EOA website, of course, employeeownership.co.uk. But actually, in November, on the 24th, 25th and 26th, we've got a 3-day festival of employee ownership. There's a track running across the 3 days where you can learn, as somebody who's curious about employee ownership, all about it. There are 3 interviews in the morning. There's one with the founder of Riverford Organics, Guy Singh Watson, CTEC, who are a big organisation, and a really interesting Welsh manufacturing business called ABBA Instruments. And then in the evening, we've got panel discussions, and throughout the day, there's different sessions. That's called EO Boost. If you go on our website, header at the top, click that link, register.
I'll share the link as well in the follow-up.
Yeah, it's all free content. If you are more interested in that because you already know you want to do it and you just want to find out how to do it and get some advice, then give us a call. Contact me directly if you want. I'm on LinkedIn, connect up with me. I'm on Twitter at Deb Oxley. My phone number's on the website as well. So contact us in any way or form.
Brilliant. Great. Well, if there's nothing else, guys, we're going to wrap up there. I'll send an email out. What day is it? Tuesday. I'll send an email before the end of the week with a link to the conference in November, Deb's contact details, Matt, your contact details as well, if that's okay, and a recording from today's session, and we'll break up the 2 different sessions separately as well, so that you can watch whatever bits of that you like. And if there's anything that any of us can help you on, then please don't be afraid to reach out, and we'll see you again towards the end of November. So I'll also share the link for November's webinar as well.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.